Joe Biden tries to create a new amendment on his way out of office. Donald Trump taps a familiar face to head the Secret Service, and the incoming administration, can they make America beautiful again? We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Friday, January 17th. Confirmation season continues. But how did Matt Gaetz pave the way for Trump's other nominees? That's the question that Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford asked in his latest Beltway brief. And now, for the final time of the Joe Biden presidency, I am joined by Blaze News editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson and Chris Bedford himself to break it all down. So, Chris, how did Matt Gaetz, right? This was the biggest headlines of all of them. How did that come through and get Pete Hegseth his nomination? How did he even make this possible?
So Matt Gaetz was an interesting nomination, obviously. He was one that was far afield from what you normally see in Washington, D.C. This is someone who is very popular with a lot of the base for some of the very loud and contrarian positions that he's taken, often in support of Donald Trump, sometimes just messing with Kevin McCarthy and other people who really bugged him. Because of that, he was extremely unpopular in Washington and with his colleagues. On top of that, there was a lot of different rumors of misdeeds. There were allegations of misdeeds in his sexual life, rumors throughout Washington of drug abuse. All of those things added to his unpopularity with Washington. So when Donald Trump took his nominees, put them all forward, and Matt Gaetz was among them, it shifted the window of what was acceptable, the window of what was politically possible pretty far. And when there was originally an idea in Trump world that maybe they could push this through, but they quickly learned in their interviews in Capitol Hill with the Senate that this was actually not something that was going to work. The Republicans in the Senate were not going to abide someone that they had those opinions on his moral character. They were able to take a scalp. Trump was able to look magnanimous and say, fine, I'm going to withdraw this one. I'm going to withdraw this one. You guys still have a little bit of power. You're still able to have some consent, which is one of the things that the Senate takes pretty seriously. But I don't want to hear any more about this. And at the same time, Matt Gaetz got to leave Congress, where he wasn't really getting along very well with his colleagues, before they tried to penalize him with an ethics report that repeated a lot of allegations the DOJ had never been able to corroborate because the accusers were so unreliable as witnesses and as accusers. Then he gets to, at that point, become kind of a martyr to the MAGA cause. He gets to decide what he's going to do next. Maybe he's got a life that returns in politics. Right now he's doing television, working in a lobbying firm. And then you come to Pete Hegseth. They tried to pull the same thing, say, well, no. But there's not really a comparison in the popularity versus unpopularity of Hegseth to Gaetz in Washington. So Trump was able to activate, and his team was able to activate not just social media users, but powerful people who are pro-Trump in and around Washington to really go after anyone who stepped out of line. There was really just a few Republican senators who even kind of hinted at it, and then they were in trouble. They ended up having to show that they were in charge. Oh, don't worry, we're going to confirm them. And then they come into the nomination week. And a lot of Republican kind of screw-ups, actually, both in the transition team and in the committees, meant that the paperwork wasn't ready for any of the other committee hearings, only for Hegseth. So all Democrat guns were going to be aimed at him. All television cameras are going to be aimed at him. Because of a pretty phenomenal prep work, because of really good team, a team of support behind him and his own acumen, he did really well. They didn't land any punches. They ended up looking pretty stupid and disorganized. And he ended up getting the votes that he needed. If it hadn't been for Matt Gaetz, I don't think that would have been possible.
Chris, talk a little bit about why you think, well, first, that the Democrats were unprepared and why you think they were unprepared, given that this seemed like it was going to be the showdown. It seems like he was the target.
The only thing that can explain it to me, because Democrats are usually really good about this, is just the incredible egos of senators, how difficult it is to get them to coordinate. When I first came to D.C. and got involved in professional politics, I was shocked shocked to learn that Republicans in the House and Republicans in the Senate don't really actually communicate, which is, you'd think they would, right? They're trying to pass legislation together. Each house has to actually push it through, but they don't. And it also turns out that a lot of senators don't actually communicate in the way that they ought to. They sort of do their own thing. They're their own little islands. They're all sitting there looking in the mirror, seeing a future president, and doing their own thing for the cameras. This was an opportunity where they tried to make all of the female senators attack Hegseth on the same line, on women serving in combat. But you saw Elizabeth Warren go completely far afield, talking about the military-industrial complex as if Hegseth has anything to do with that at all. And it was just disorganized. And at the same time, the people they chose to lead it, I mean, I'm sorry to offend, but they came across as shrill. It wasn't actually a convincing case. It seemed like they were screaming at him. They were just yelling at him. And it ends up just kind of backfiring and crumbling. I'm not exactly sure. This was really their only shot of the week. If they had taken down Hegseth on Tuesday, then the rest of the Trump administration just would have been stumbling through and just trying to figure out. They would have gained momentum. But that disorganized play, the egos in the room, and just a bad delivery combined to give an easy win to Republicans.
Yeah, and I want to give Hegseth credit because what we see from him is he's a TV guy, right? We know that he can go out there and deliver a message, but you also see a guy who is very convicted in the things that he is saying. And when you put those two things together, Bedford, I mean, of course we were going to have the outcome that we had. Democrats don't actually know what it's like to go out there and live those convictions.
He wouldn't let them. Usually you see Republican nominees getting all squirrely and trying to get around and say, well, yeah, I've got religion, but I'm not going to let it impact my policy decisions. Lord knows we'll have an atheist government. And Hegseth basically pulled out a crusader sword, took a knee, and consecrated his nomination to Christ. Anyone who dares challenge him is challenging Christ's ability to forgive us. It was amazing right off the bat. Yeah. And then he talked about carrying and burying wounded comrades. He talked about kneeling in front of desert crosses for combat veterans and colleagues that he had lost in combat, in the wars that Washington had sent him to. All of those things combined, he has a close relationship, thank God, despite his tumultuous past, with all of his children. He was able to list them off and talk about their role in his life. It was disarming, and it made someone who was a lot more difficult to attack than just the two-dimensional stereotype that they might have had of some television philanderer.
Now, one person we do need to talk about here is the person who became the Attorney General nominee, and that's Pam Bondi. Well, you talk a little bit about the difference between Pam Bondi and Matt Gaetz. I mean, this is a pretty large, substantial change. But as you point out, the Democrats seem almost afraid to attack her.
They decided not to. She's a beautiful parent, 59-year-old adult woman, extremely accomplished in all of her career fields, and they could have gone after her, but they decided that it was going to be a bad look to go after her. Basically, everyone got that memo except for Mazie Hirono. Maybe she got it, struggled to read it, not exactly clear on that. But everyone else decided that they were just going to use her nomination instead to attack people who they think are going to be easier to attack villains. Donald Trump, of course, was used frequently. But we also got a preview of how they're going to treat poor Kash Patel in his hearing. Every chance they got, they tried to say, basically, will you punish and condemn Kash Patel? And Pam Bondi, being a savvy political operator, just declined to do so. I'm not going to condemn Kash Patel. We don't have any enemies list here. He made a joke on television. Give me a break. And I actually do say poor Kash Patel, but I don't totally mean it, because that guy is an investigator. He's a professional. He's really well qualified for this job. He dug into what the FBI was doing in a way that no other person in Washington was able to. The reason why we know so much about FBI corruption is because of his reports from outside the FBI. So now him coming in, I don't actually envy the Democrat senators who try to make a fool of him. It's similar with when you saw Russ Vought's confirmation hearing. Whenever you saw J.D. Vance give an interview to the New York Times or whatever, when you walk into a room and you're very confident that the people who are interrogating you aren't as intelligent as you, don't have the grasp over the subject matter that you have, well, that's a leg up.
All right, Chris, I have to move on because Joe Biden left people scratching their head today because out of nowhere, he announced that the Equal Rights Amendment is ratified. And he posted on X, today I'm affirming what I have long believed, what 3/4 of the states have ratified. that the 28th Amendment is the law of the land, guaranteeing American equal rights and protections under the law, regardless of their sex. Can he just do this?
You know, I got the phone call from Thomas, our great producer, saying, do you know about this? And I remember just being dumbfounded, saying, Joe Biden can't amend the Constitution on his way out of office. Did I miss something completely? But no, it turned out that Joe Biden is missing something, and we all know exactly what that is. The Democrats know exactly what he's missing, too. His marbles. I know it's awkward to say, but that's a great example of it right there. The Equal Rights Amendment had a ton of momentum in, I think, the 70s and the early 80s, and it was stopped pretty flatly by the bravery of Phyllis Schlafly, a conservative woman who had previously dedicated herself to raising her family, who came out and said, no, we're not going to do this. And by the way, for those who are unfamiliar with ERA, what it essentially would do is what a lot of the transgender bill does. It would eliminate federal protections for sex, which could be extremely dangerous. We're not just talking about bathrooms. We're not even just talking about drafting women into the military, a completely barbaric thing that all Democrats are obsessed with. We're talking about that would impact spousal abuse laws. There's a reason why there are specific laws against men beating their wives that don't exist for men beating men, and that's one of them. That would be eliminated by ERA. But it did get a lot of ratifications early in the states, and it petered off. Now, there's no real established law here. It's basically kind of common law custom, but these things don't just remain dormant forever. So Virginia was the last state, I think, to ratify it around 5 years ago. But other states had actually revoked it. Other states had actually removed the ratification before then. So they didn't even have the number that Joe Biden said. The times have completely changed. The American people aren't asking for this culture war that he bumbled into igniting, and probably actually does believe in igniting. It's such a great crystal clear moment of how mushy his mind is, combined with how quick he is to divide the American people with more cultural war.
Yeah, Chris, I had the same reaction. I couldn't believe it was real. I thought it was some kind of parody. Lo and behold, and then you think, well, maybe it's like an intern.
Headline.
Yeah, who had the ERA being constitutional on the law of the land on their bingo card from some kind of White House intern at best? But maybe, who knows? The whole thing is absolutely crazy, and I wonder what kind of weirdness we might still yet see before the end of the day.
Imagine being the person who posted it. Oh, okay, the Constitution's amended. Let's just put out a tweet.
It's just, I don't even know what to compare it to. But what we should talk about is oligarchy. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and ever since Biden's farewell address on Wednesday, you get these big name Democrats all of a sudden coming out, like Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, sounding the alarm about oligarchy in America. There's oligarchy in America. And what's interesting about this is I keep thinking, gosh, if oligarchy means, a few people I don't like among the wealthy class have a different opinion, it almost makes me think like, well, maybe it's not as oligarchic as I thought, because they're almost proving themselves wrong. But talk a little bit about this, because this really seems to be something that they're digging into.
Well, I think they have to, right? Usually when there's not a lot of one-term presidents who run for re-election. And Joe Biden being one, you're going to see what you saw with previous times it happens, which is the party that lost that term, at least one time, one in a row for their guy. So preceded by a Republican, then a Democrat, then defeated. The party that loses that election usually has to pivot, because Americans like continuity. The favor in any election is with the incumbent, generally speaking. They've got the bully pulpit, as Teddy Roosevelt used to call it. They could give the addresses from the White House. They have the ability to just forgive student loans, or try to change interest rates when they're able to, or decide on foreign policy to affect the actual outcome of the election. So when they lose, the party tries to figure out, well, what did we do wrong? And I think this is Democrats going back to their old playbook, also being sore losers that Jeff Bezos spent $1 million. Bezos spent $1 million on an inauguration ticket. By the way, he's not going to be able to use. That's $1 million souvenir now that they've canceled the inauguration outdoor events for cold. He could probably go to some parties with it. But they're trying to pivot. The problem is you can't just pivot in talking points. The Democratic Party is completely and totally not just the party of oligarchs and the wealthy and the offshorers and big tech, despite these recent donations and despite Elon Musk's defection. They're also not a party that actually appeals to working class voters. You can't just say oligarchy on Twitter and in speeches and then in your policies pursue the goals of upper middle class lesbian college professors. You need to actually do stuff for the working class. And if you remember looking at Kamala Harris's campaign, she'd be calling into the BET awards and say, "Oh, you know, girl, we're working on transgender bathroom bills." Well, that's not actually reaching the working class. So you can yell about oligarchy all you want, but the Democrats are going to have to do a lot more soul searching and honestly a lot of purging if they're actually going to pivot back to trying winning back middle America.
That's right. You go, girl isn't going to cut it. Bedford, we're going to be on our way out to see you. I can't wait to be there in
Fly
D.C.
safe.
with you guys. We'll see you soon.
And dress warm.
Oh, trust me. That's going to happen. We'll see you soon.
See you then.
Don't go anywhere, because our next guest is going to break down the odds of a Trump assassination attempt on Inauguration Day and tell you about all of those changes next. Well, it's a new year, new you, right? Now it's time to focus on what matters most, and that is creating a healthier lifestyle and try and get some more time with your family and spend less going out to eat. GoodRanchers.com is here to help you turn all of your resolutions that you have into solutions. When you buy your meat from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches, and you can skip all the lines at the grocery store. Good Ranchers delivers 100% American meat straight to your door, so you can start 2025 with better choices, better meals, and better moments at home. Visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim $25 off, plus free express shipping and your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. And if spending time with your family and spending less money going out to eat and trying to get some quality, nutritious American food, if you're trying to do that this year, then be sure to visit GoodRanchers.com. Then use my code Jill today for the meat that delivers just that. GoodRanchers.com. Use code Jill to claim $25 off and get free meat in your box for a year. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. Donald Trump has a new head of the Secret Service. It's Sean Curran, who is the head of his campaign detail and a 22-year veteran of the agency. Curran made headlines for his bravery during the assassination attempt on Trump. Eric Prince jumped online last night praising the decision, but not everyone was as excited with this decision. So here with more is Susan Crabtree. She's the national political correspondent for RealClearPolitics, and she has been all over this story. So Susan, break down this pick and the reactions that you've seen since yesterday.
Well, there's been a lot of drama over this pick. It's not been announced and formalized yet, which is interesting to me because you had Dan Bongino, who's an 11-year veteran of the agency and a big critic, of course, of what happened in the Butler on July 13th at the assassination attempt against Trump. And he has been very vigorous, and even though he's friends with Sean Curran, the two were assigned in Russia together many years ago, but he's been very vocal about he does not believe that Sean is the right man for the job. And last night, I had tweeted out something that said, I'd posted on X.com, something that said, well, I'm sure he will still be getting Eric Prince's advice about the Secret Service overhauls and reforms, as well as Dan Bongino's. And Dan said quite curtly that he had already given his advice and it wasn't taken, and he hopes it all goes well.
Wow. Little drama there. Little drama online. I guess that if we look at what we would want this person to do, the question would be, are they going to be able to reform the Secret Service? And so when you look at this, how do you break that down? Will this guy be able to reform it and make the changes that are needed?
That's right, and that's what Dan said he was concerned about as well. He was a contender for the job, so some people were saying it was sour grapes, but he went on his podcast this morning and said, no, I really just care about keeping Donald Trump safe, and hoped that Sean Curran could do this. But the main issues that a lot of people within the Secret Service and other critics have been saying are in desperate need of reform are, basically you got the drone technology. Okay, the Secret Service's motto was yesterday's technology today. That's a joke within the Secret Service. So you need to you need to make sure that you're on the cutting edge of this drone technology as we're seeing the threat for the last few months just build with all these unexplained drones on the eastern seaboard. And Trump was on Dan's show yesterday, and he said he's going to get to the bottom of those unexplained drones and talk to the public about what those are all about. Also, complete lack of manpower right now. The retention rates within the Secret Service are so low, and the morale is just abysmal within the Secret Service. They've been extremely stretched thin this election cycle, and they are protecting some 37 people, and that will increase for a time when the two administrations overlap, because there's always extra protection provided for the outgoing people, and there's at least 15 to 18, I'm hearing, new people within Trump's family and J.D. Vance's family and others, the cabinet, that they're going to have to protect.
That is something to pay attention to for sure. I want to look back, though, with the 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life. Do you think that we're going to see any accountability from either the Secret Service or anywhere inside of the federal government when it comes to this? Because I know this is still something that so many people in our audience care about.
Absolutely. I wrote about this morning in an article and put it on X as well. There are some serious anger that 6 months has gone by and no one has been disciplined over the Butler assassination attempt or the second assassination attempt in Florida at the Florida golf course that Trump owns. And there's 2 individuals that actually I've been told are failing upward in some people's eyes. Secret Service disputes that. But the Mio Perez is the site agent. She was the one that was in charge of the entire security for the Butler rally. She did not make sure that AGR building where trucks got opened fire was covered. And so people are extremely angry that she now has been reassigned, I'm told, to the Miami field office in a desk job. I understand it's in the Criminal Intelligence Division. Well, a lot of people might think that is a good thing, that she's no longer in protective duty. But within the Secret Service, they view that as sort of a perk, that she doesn't have to be on the road, getting her teeth kicked in, as they did, just exhausting hours on protective detail for 6 years to get promoted. So some people are viewing that as a promotion. The Secret Service tells me that's not the case, that she's not getting paid anymore, but Miami is a pretty good office, a lot of very desirable office that people want to go to. And then there's Nick Menster is his name, and he was her supervisor, and he also didn't make sure that that AGR building was covered, that she had the plan in place. And so, but yet I'm told that he's going to be the number 2 on protecting Laura and Eric Trump. And he has never been on telework, and so they put a lot of these agents that were in the Pittsburgh field office, and this agent I mentioned before that were in charge of security, Mio Perez, they put them on telework leave at first, and now they're reassigning them. But Nick Menster is his name, was never put on telework, and now he seems like he's getting a promotion.
Susan, it really is. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's unacceptable. I mean, I really don't think that our audience is going to forget about this, and it's going to come back around. But speaking of assassination attempts, let's talk about what's going on in D.C. Very soon, where Jill and I will be there, leaving soon for our nation's capital, along with many other people. The inauguration is going to take place indoors, they say, because of cold temperatures. But you've been warning about potential threats. Certainly, they've been on the mind of a lot of people. Dan Bongino has been warning about this. And so this is one of the first things I thought of was, is the cold weather cover for the need to move things indoors? Is this actually going inside because it's cold?
Well, it's a really extremely touchy subject right now. So I am gingerly reaching out to my sources about that very topic. But I personally believe it's a good cover for just taking it on the safe side. Dan and some of my sources have been telling me that the drone mitigation system, they have a very good mitigation system, and nobody wants to go into sources and methods about that in DC, and they've been using it for years. But there's these new drone techniques out there, technology out there, and there are deep concerns that we're not ready for it, and for all that has been out there recently with China's technology advancements. So I do think it's better safe than sorry, and it's hard for me because I've watched several inaugurations in person. I love the pomp and circumstance of the inauguration. They have been very cold. I remember being extremely cold at George W. Bush's inauguration. And that's just the nature of the beast in Washington in January and February. So it's kind of feels I don't they're not saying yet. I just listened to an interview with one of Trump's lawyers, and they're not saying yet whether he will even do the walk down from the Capitol to the White House. That's so traditional, sort of pomp and circumstance that you're seeing, and they're surrounded by Secret Service, and they get to actually walk among and wave at the crowds. That's sort of a sad situation, but I do think better safe than sorry, and it will still be beautiful inside the Capitol, those images, and to set the tone for a new administration, a time of great change in Washington.
Yeah, Susan, we mentioned your story on drones earlier this week, actually, and the fact that we should be expecting to see them before and during the inauguration itself. So if people are still going to be out there and still being, part of DC and want to go out there and be a part of this moment, would you expect to still see them even though it's going to be moving indoors?
Yes, I do. I think there's going to be a lot of protests. There's 10,000 protests they have permits. Those are the ones with the permits. So we know there's going to be more than 10,000. There's going to be 25,000 Secret Service and law enforcement and National Guardsmen protecting DC that day. So I do expect these drones to be up there. And Matt McCool, who has a great, cool name to be the Secret Service ahead of this inauguration, he's sort of this square-jawed, straight out of Central Casting agent. He's in charge of this inauguration, and he said yes, he has 100% confident that he can keep the public safe, and that he warned that these drones are going to be in the air, so not to get concerned even in the days leading up to the inauguration, so this weekend too.
I mean, it's unbelievable that the drone issue, right, has carried over this entire time from the sightings along the eastern seaboard to the actual inauguration day. All I can think of when I hear you talking is the chatter about this from both, fringe conspiracy theorists to everyone else is people are going to be paying a lot of attention to what's in the sky and what goes on that day in Washington, D.C., no?
I have felt it after 9/11. I always felt when there was a plane in the sky, I sort of would have instinctively duck for years afterwards, especially if it was right over me. So yeah, I think you're going to have that feeling in DC. Unfortunately, there was an Iranian plot. There was a video that the Iranian leaders put out that showed a caricature cartoon video of Trump getting shot on a golf course, this time with a drone. So yeah, the tensions are high. People are deeply concerned about his public safety. So with that in mind, it was good to be on the safe side. And I'm sure the parties that night will have some of the more festive gala feeling that we've traditionally see at the inauguration. But certainly there'll be a festive mood, but also plenty of protesters out there. So we want to keep the law enforcement people want to keep everyone as safe as possible. Certainly the Secret Service has been doing these national special security events. That's what they call them, these big monumental events. 5 times already this year without an incident, including as recently as the January 6th certification and Jimmy Carter's lying in wait. And they've done 83 of them total in recent years in Washington, D.C. So D.C. Secret Service Field Office is very, they have the best equipment, and they have the best drone mitigation system that they can possibly have, they say, and they are working with military and law enforcement. So I am just wishing everybody a safe and a happy experience when leading up to this moment. I hope the protests don't get out of hand, and that everybody can feel enough comfort to enjoy themselves.
So do we, Susan. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And Matthew, everybody should be out there and staying safe, right? Everybody's trying to take precautions and do what is necessary. And if you see some drones above you, they should be the good guys.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. At the same time, I'm going to be looking up for drones for any kind of drone. I'm just going to be very aware of what's in the sky. No, I think it's very good that that they came out and said this, right? Everything's going to be fine. There's going to be drones. They're ours. But I guarantee you, I just made a note to make sure that our own Julio Rosas, who will be out there covering the protests, right, is up to speed on all of this, because it is going to be insanely cold. A bunch of people who are, anti everything going on outside. And increasingly, it sounds like, if there's no parade or anything, all the people there to celebrate are just going to be inside partying. The whole dynamic has changed. So regardless, it's going to be a fantastic time, and we're going to celebrate.
It is. It's going to be a great time. And when we come back, Trump, can he improve the way that American cities look? We'll have an architectural critic weigh in just ahead. This Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, live from the heart of Washington, D.C., Blaze Media is going to have the start of America's golden age with Donald Trump, I should say, second inauguration. Glenn Beck, Stu Burguiere, they're going to be broadcasting from an incredible spot that's overlooking the Potomac, all the stunning views of the Capitol's most iconic monuments. And joining them on Blaze TV's coverage are Ali Bestucky, a guy named Matthew Peterson, Chris Bedford, and Steve Baker, and a few other special surprise guests to break down this history-making moment. And the left is gearing up for major protests. As we know, Julio Rosas will be there to cover it. He'll be right in the middle of all the action, so don't miss any of the unfiltered commentary and analysis that you won't get anywhere else. It's all going to be Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern for Blaze Media's live inauguration coverage. And if you want in on the action, get $47 off your annual subscription with promo code 47. It's at blaze47.com. Join us today. Don't miss a moment of the action. Go to blaze47.com now. Well, there are so many things to focus on, but will Donald Trump make America beautiful again? Many arts organizations receive federal funding in the form of grants. So how might Trump change this funding in his upcoming term? Justin Shubow, he is the president of the National Civic Art Society, and he served on the U.S. Commission for Fine Arts during Trump's first term. And he joins us now to discuss. So thanks so much for joining us. I want to know what you think and you expect to see from Donald Trump and what he can do for American art.
Sure. First off, thanks so much for having me. I think that President Trump's going to have an agenda, make America beautiful again. In his first term, he took revolutionary action, issuing an executive order that reoriented our federal buildings, which have been ugly and modernist since World War II, and required that they be beautiful, ennobling, with a preference for classical and traditional design. And I think that there's going to be a look at aesthetics across the administration, not just for federal buildings. Trump's executive order, to be clear, was rescinded by President Biden, but I'd be shocked if he did not reissue it. But I also think there's going to be attention paid to the cultural agencies, such as the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the largest funder of the arts and arts education in the country.
Justin, we should cut to the chase and be honest. I think we have a problem on the right when it comes to understanding any of this stuff. Let me just say that's my opinion. But I think this creates an issue for us when it comes to beautifying America, right? Make America beautiful again. And what would you say to a lot of conservatives who might say, well, we shouldn't be spending money on any of this stuff, and this really isn't the government's business?
Sure. So I would point to Theodore Roosevelt, who was deeply interested in art and architecture, and he said that a nation's greatness that is wholly divorced from artistic production is but a one-sided, malformed greatness. We need great art in this country, and government patronage that can achieve that would enhance the country's prestige. We can't rely on the private market to do everything right. There can be market failures. I mean, just look at how bad so much contemporary art is in galleries and museums. I think that the federal government can step in and do great good in this area.
Well, I look at Donald Trump, right? Of course, we know he likes beautiful things. You can look at the Trump Tower. He has gold everywhere. What do you get a sense of his personal aesthetic, his personal life, and the connection there to what he wants to do in his second term?
Sure. So, I mean, there is absolutely Trump Tower in New York, which is a, steel and glass skyscraper, very glitzy. But at the same time, you look at his magnificent house in Palm Beach, Florida, Mar-a-Lago, that's a historic Spanish colonial design that I think is highly beautiful. I think President Trump, obviously is a builder, and he has his finger on the pulse of ordinary Americans. And he understands that when it comes to our public buildings, people want beautiful designs that harken back to the tradition started by the founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington consciously chose classical architecture for the core buildings of government in the new nation, whether it's the White House or the U.S. Capitol. And that tradition lasted for 150 years and has included things like the U.S. Supreme Court, and then later the Jefferson Memorial and Lincoln Memorial. I mean, these are iconic buildings that represent the best of our country.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about why. I mean, I think a lot of people would acknowledge in our audience that something happened, something went wrong somewhere along the way, and we no longer make beautiful buildings. We no longer pay attention to that sort of thing. In fact, we have a lot of ugly monstrosities. One of my favorites being the education department. I mean, these places are just ugly. And we've done that, right? And then when it comes to, say, the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, what's in a lot of conservative minds is, terrible sort of blasphemous art from the late 80s and early 90s and controversies about, really the money going to people who were very political and progressive and trying to transgress, traditional boundaries, et cetera. So something clearly went wrong. And it sounds to me like you're suggesting, well, there's a way to get back on track, using government funding and focus.
Yeah. My vision for the National Endowment for the Arts comes from Dana Gioia, the master poet and translator who ran the agency under George W. Bush. He said a great nation deserves great art. Yes, something has deeply gone wrong with art and architecture, including that sponsored by the federal government. And if the NEA is run properly, it could help create a cultural renaissance and an American renewal that is widely needed. I mean, that's across the board, whether it's in visual art, in music, in literature. There's incredible opportunity here. And I think that there is a great deal of optimism about culture among Republicans that hopefully will be represented in the new administration.
Great. Well, before we go, could you give us some examples of the kinds of things that could be done or are going on that would be positive, that would be beautiful, that we could, get people excited?
Sure. So an important new work in Washington, D.C. is the National World War I Memorial. The key element of it is this magnificent bronze relief done in a classical style by the sculptor Sabin Howard. It's called the Weight of Sacrifice, and it represents soldiers going into battle, being heroic, being valorous, then entering the crucible. You do see suffering and loss, but the work ends with a victory parade with American soldiers flying the flag, representing the country on the ascendant. And what's so important about this work is it is beautiful, it is inspiring, and the symbolism is obvious. This is a work that is legible to the ordinary person. You don't need a tour guide or an audio guide to understand what is going on. It is ennobling and represents the best of our country. And my hope is that works like that can represent a different direction that art can take here.
Yeah, Justin, you can definitely see that making America great again is inherently tied to making America beautiful again. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And Matthew, when I think of all of the things that he's talking about there with the World War I memorial that's going up, this is one of the exciting parts for me going to DC because there are so many beautiful things in DC. Yeah, it's the swamp. There's a bunch of bad things everywhere. There's a bunch of bad things all over the country, but it's beautiful in DC.
Yeah, I think that the success that we had in the past, the way that we used to build from the time of the founding up until not too long ago, is a testament to what he's talking about. And we have to get back to it because it should be that way. It should be the case that when you go to DC for the inauguration, when you go to DC for business and work, you do take a tour. Like I always would do the quiet tour at night myself. I would walk for miles, right, around those really sacred monuments. And the importance of that can't be, you can't overemphasize it. This is something that makes you a country. And I hope that if we can get back to that, right, that would be a great sign. It would be a great sign for America.
You're going to do the walking tour when it's 11 degrees out in DC?
Yeah, I might take a break
wait for
this
the
time.
next trip.
Yeah, I might wait until it's a little warmer. Springtime's very nice there.
Well, don't go anywhere.
Don't wait for that.
We're going to talk about our trip up to DC and everything else, as this is now going to be the last show for Joe Biden in his presidency. We'll wrap it up right after this. Well, we come back and you know what? It's going to be the final time, the final few minutes of the Joe Biden presidency here on Blaze News tonight. And Matthew, I couldn't be more excited to say those words because that's why we have the inauguration, because Donald Trump won and we get to go see him go ahead and take the stage, even if it's going to be indoors.
Yeah, you remember when all this started and we were like, if we make it to Inauguration Day, right? I mean, because the idea was it was going to be a close election. If the left lost, they would be fighting it the entire time. That's not what happened. It was a definitive win. It was a win that carried a very strong mandate from the people to the president, the new president of the United States of America. It flipped everything and changed this country. We completely changed course. Nonetheless, I still think that because of how everything has gone down in the last, crazy years, I think there's also a sense of just wanting to see it locked in, right? We want to see this locked in. We want to see Trump come in there and we want to see this done. Hand on the Bible, let's go. And the excitement is so different. It's so different than anything really I've been a part of in the past, because it's like he was exiled, he came back to power, and the crew that he has assembled is ready to go.
Yeah, the Avengers are assembled, and it is one of the greatest political comebacks that we've ever seen. And I can't wait just to go ahead and be in DC for it. And the Blaze media coverage is going to be incredible. We have Glenn and Stu. They're going to be anchoring all the Blaze coverage. It's going to start at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And you're going to be over there during that part of the day.
Yeah, Glenn's going to have a room with a view. So I'm going to hang out there a little bit, as long as he lets me, and then I believe I'll be on with Stu for a little bit, and we'll be talking about stuff. And then it's Blaze News Tonight time, and we'll be coming at you from not too far from the Capitol, and we'll see what kind of special guests we turn up and chat with. It's going to be good stuff, must watch stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And I look at it, and it's going to be a big day for our colleague Steve Baker, right? The whole time Trump has said in his first few hours that he will pardon the J6ers, and that could be such a special moment to have that all go down. And Steve is going to be part of the coverage as well for us.
Yeah, I mean, talk about well-deserved. I mean, Steve has spent a lot of time in the Capitol doing research on all of this for so many years, and had this hanging over his head for so long. And in a way, I feel responsible. Like Blaze is responsible. They really didn't go after him until I hired him, and it's almost as if it was retaliation in my mind against what he was doing, coming against a journalist. Shameful that this happens in America, But if he can get that pardon, that will be an emotional day for him, and we will all celebrate.
I saw a headline this morning that the DOJ was still going after somebody just this week for their involvement in J6. That's 4 years ago now, with a pardon hanging over their heads. They know that Donald Trump is going to come out and do this. He said that, especially for all the nonviolent offenders, it's basically going to be a done deal. And yet the Department of Justice still feels the need to go after people this very week. If you want to see, you wanted to talk about taxpayer dollars being completely wasted. This is, Exhibit A.
Pro-lifers, right? Anyone with traditional Catholics. This is an FBI run amok. It's a DOJ run amok. It needs to stop. It can't stop soon enough. But you're exactly right. They're not going to stop until the last hour. That's how zealous and insane these people are. We're actually going to have a story from Joe Hanneman that will come out on Monday about another J6er, just terrible persecution still going on, and they're going to keep doing it right up until the final hour. That's who these people are.
And when you see that, when you hear that, now that the Trump administration, and this is why it's almost a blessing in disguise, if you will, right? That he didn't just go ahead and get that 2020 victory that we waited, because now we see all of this play out, and you get a invigorated Donald Trump who is ready to dismantle the deep state. And you see how necessary it is. We all know it in our heads. But you see just these stupid examples, one after another, and the weaponization of the federal government and the way that they go after the American people. It has never been more important. There's never been a better opportunity to dismantle the deep state than what we have right now.
Yeah, look, no Republican president, right, has ever been able to roll back the administrative state, which arose in the last century. Not a single president has been Reagan. No one was able to roll this thing back. And what's happened, I call it the great unveiling now. Everyone is seeing this thing for what it is. Trump his presence revealed the corruption, the depth of the problem, and now he's going back with people who are very strong, a lot of people anyway, who are very strong around him, who want to solve this problem. And these two things, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to come to a head. They are going to come to a head over and over and over again over the next 4 years. And the great question is, can Trump, with that mandate from the people, finally break the strength and power of the deep state, of the administrative state, of the fourth branch of government that rules us, that thinks it rules us, because it does. And, we're about to find out.
And we see Joe Biden on one of his last days in office, just going and adding amendments to the Constitution. We have 28 now, everybody. It's time to celebrate.
Yeah. I don't even know. This is a clown show. It's on the way out, say goodbye to the clowns in the car, because it really is pathetic and sad. And all you can do is laugh. And thankfully, we can count down the clock because it's almost over.
The countdown clock is continuing on. And you know what? Equal rights for everybody out there. Joe Biden has said so. And thankfully, we aren't going to have to deal with that for very much longer. We will be on our way to D.C. Later tonight. And we will see everybody from our nation's capital on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.